Okay, so in this video, I'm going to share 10 cash flowing assets. Now, with high levels of inflation, a very imminent recession, we have a lot of problems in the economy. I think a lot of us could use some extra cash. So I've been focusing quite a bit on cash flowing assets. You could also label this as passive income. And these are 10 things that you can do to generate money either on an annual basis. Some of these can produce cash on a quarterly or even on a monthly basis as well. Just a couple of notes here. First of all, look, this isn't like some magical thing that's going to make you $10 million in the next month. If you want to do that, just go play the lottery. And I don't have any courses to sell you. There's none of that BS. We're just going to get right into it. I can promise you, you haven't heard some of these ideas for cash flowing assets. Now, one more thing we need to touch on before we get into these is that this video is really made for two different types of people. So the one type of people, first of all, is those who maybe have $10 in your bank account or $20 in your bank account. So you're trying to create cash flowing assets that can pay you in some form of passive income, but you don't have much money to begin with. Now that's actually much harder, but there's still going to be some options here for you in this video. And then this video is also made for those people who maybe you have money and you're looking to invest it or you're looking to do something with it. And this is the case that I found myself in this past year where I had cash sitting in the bank, but inflation's eating away at it at 8 or 10%. And you're looking for cash flowing assets that can pay you. So it's made for both types of people. There's going to be something in here for everyone. So let's go ahead and get started with the video. But of course, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this. Okay, so the first cash flowing asset that I think is really fascinating is timberland. So the reason why I put this number one here is because it's something that I'm doing myself. And also I realized a lot of people don't realize that you can invest into timberland in the United States. So, there's not really a good fund or option to do this. You kind of have to do this yourself by going out and buying land, but you can cash flow quite a bit on this. In fact, I learned that a lot of people in the Carolinas, in Georgia, Alabama, sort of like in the southern region, and this is actually kind of like a lot of people's retirement plans in those regions. So for example, if you buy, say, 100 acres, and then every 5 years you might have 20 or 25 acres of that 100-acre plot that is then used for timber. And obviously, for example, if you're watching this and you don't like cutting down trees, you're probably watching this from a wooden house, right? And when you go get your paper straw at Starbucks, that's also from recycled paper, and that paper came from trees. So we need to use lumber, and so it's a pretty important process in the human life and in the world. And so you can do this in a sustainable way with timber tracts where you can sell portions of your timber. My grandfather did this a long time ago with his land, sold timber and got some money from it, right? So you can do this, you can cash flow with it if you have land. I just think it's something so fascinating that a lot of people don't know, but Mike and I are looking to buy probably 1,000 acres or so in the next year of timberland that can cash flow for us. It's a pretty cool setup. Okay, so that is a great one for people who already have money. Now let's talk about one that maybe people don't have very much money that you can still get started with, and that is something like a car rental business. Okay, so the first thing I think of when I think of car rental businesses is actually with Turo, and one of my friends, he has a channel called Financial Wolf. He actually made a couple videos about his car rental business, but he's really starting to scale it up, and he's buying more vehicles, and he's going to start renting more of them, and he rents all of them through Turo, which takes a cut of his car rentals. But he basically is setting this up so that I think he's hiring someone now so that that person can just manage all the rentals and he just buys the cars. And the good thing about the car rental business is that you can do this with a car loan that might only cost you a few $100s per month, and then you can rent this out to other people. And I think it's just a really interesting cash flowing business that I would say anyone with a car could get started with, thanks to things like Turo that are pretty decentralized from like the standard Hertz and Avis and all those big rental car businesses of the past. So it's a cash flowing business. I've seen people who have dozens of cars that they use on Turo and they make quite a bit of money from them. So it's just one that I wanted to include here. Okay, so the next cash flowing asset, this one actually pays me pretty well. It is dividend stock. So you can buy dividend stocks on a platform like Moomoo, which I think is giving away 15 free stocks if you use my link down below in the description. They've been doing some really big promos. Make sure you read the terms in the description to figure out how many stocks are giving away at the moment. Sometimes that deal changes a little bit. But with dividend stocks, look, I've been building up my dividend stock portfolio for over a decade now, and I pretty much just keep buying and buying and buying. And companies will tend to give you a few percent of their stock price every year, sort of as a reward for owning their stock. It's like a way to give back the company's earnings back to their shareholders. I have some videos on dividend stocks as well. I made this one a little while ago where I talked about my top dividend stocks that pay me a couple $1,000s per month. So you can go check out that video if you want to learn more about dividend stocks or investing in general. But this is one that is really extremely passive. I don't have to do anything, but it does take money up front to really get started with this. The cool thing though is that you can get started with $5. You can open up a Moomoo account with $100 or less, and you can start investing that way. And maybe it might only be cash flowing you $20 a year. But guess what? Next year or the year after that and the year after that, as long as you keep compounding and adding into this, it can end up generating you even more money, assuming that you have companies that are growing their dividends. So dividend stocks is just something that I absolutely love. There are some disadvantages to something like them, like for example with taxes, they are taxable. But overall, look, dividend stocks is one of my favorite things that can cash flow, and it really truly is a passive income source that I've been using to pay my bills, to pay my rent, to pay everything. It just took a while to build it up. Okay, the next cash flowing asset is going to be government bonds, but not just the standard treasuries, which I know I promised I'm making a video about bonds, but you can get things like government I bonds, which yield, I think, 9.62%. Now you are capped at $10,000 per year that you can put into this, but getting 9.62% from the government is a pretty great deal, considering that the US government is probably not going to default on that loan. It's a pretty great setup, I would say. So you can go on to, I think it's Treasury Direct, just Google it, Treasury Direct, and you can find the way to buy the I bonds that get you 9.62% in essentially passive income. Or there's actually a company that I invested into a while ago called Yada. They are actually allowing access for their users to basically get these I bonds through their platform. It's a pretty cool setup, so you can go check out that as well. It's Yada. Yada Savings is the app. And so they're kind of just helping people remove that friction from having to go onto Treasury Direct and sign up for it. They can just do it through the app, which is very simple. So I'll leave a link to them down below as well if you wanted to get that 9.62% interest. I don't know how long that's going to stick around either. Some of these deals might change a little bit depending on what month you are watching this video or what year you are watching this video. Okay, so another one here is billboards. Now, I thought about this actually when I was looking at some land and thinking about how I can increase the cap rate or effectively the cash flow of some land that I was considering buying. And I realized it was along a massive stretch of highway. And that's when I came to the conclusion that perhaps we could focus on having some billboards on our property to increase our cash flows. Now, you do have to keep in mind that with billboards, you can't just buy a plot of land in the desert along like Route 15 from Vegas to LA and then just prop up like a million billboards along the highway. You can't do that. There's actually specific laws that regulate who can have billboards on their property, how many billboards they're allowed to have. I think it's called the Highway Beautification Act or something along those lines. So make sure you read into those details and all the fine print on that. But if you think about it, if you have billboards on a property, maybe you purchase a property that has billboards, you can cash flow with this. I also know someone who has some cell towers at the very corner of their property, and I know someone else who has windmills on their property, and they actually get rent from the companies who do that. So they do like these long-term, multi-decade leases where they will pay them, 15, 20 grand a year to have something like a cell tower on their property. And that also is quite a bit of passive income, although I don't think I would want a cell tower on my property. But there's just a lot of options there when it comes to land and property and things that you can do for that. Now, I think one of my other favorite ways to create some type of cash flowing asset is hard money lending. Okay, so this one is a little bit sketchy, I would say, and it's not that you're going and breaking someone's knees with a baseball bat or something but hard money lending is basically if someone that needs money and they can't go to a bank for it because maybe they have bad credit or they're already maxed out on their credit at the bank. But whatever it might be, there's reasons why people don't want to go to a bank for a loan. And sometimes I can offer those loans to my friends and associates at a certainly higher interest rate than what somebody else might do. So this sounds sketchy, I know, but here, let me give you an example of what it actually looks like, okay? Let's say that one of my friends wants to do a fix and flip. He wants to buy a property, he wants to fix it up, and he wants to flip it after he renovates the property. If he goes to the bank and tries to do that, sometimes the financing might fall through or just takes too long, and the guy wants to do a cash offer instead of having to deal with like Bank of America or something. And so in that case, he might come to me and I'll just lend him some money at a specific interest rate that I'm going to determine based off of his risk profile, and then I'll lend him that money. Usually it's going to be probably around the 10% range plus some points on top of that for lending some money. So that's the basics of like lending money to people, but you can basically become a bank. Make sure that you read into rules on this, of course, as well. Make sure that you're not breaking any laws with like lending and also not getting screwed, because it happens a lot where people lend money to friends and then that friend ends up not paying them back, and then it creates this huge mess. This is why when I lend money to people, I don't really look based off of my relationship with them, but more so their risk profile and whether or not they pay back loans in the past. So like, for example, I'm not going to lend $10,000 to my cousin if he has a history of not paying people back. But maybe say my brother, who I know is always good for his money, always pays people back, I'm going to lend money to him. And honestly, because it's my brother, probably not charge him any interest. But you see what I'm saying there with, you really have to look at someone's risk, look at their credit and everything else to figure out how much you would want to charge in interest. Obviously nothing predatory. Like if a friend needs some money, I'm just going to let him borrow some money for a little while. But if it's someone who's doing it for investment, like a hard money loan, I'm usually going to do around 10%, give or take, depending on the risk and also depending on the current interest rate at the moment. It's one that I think is pretty cool. But of course, like I said, definitely risky. So let me share another asset with you that I think is really interesting, and that is to purchase very small businesses and then let them run, maybe grow them a little bit. It's going to take you some effort here to actually get this going, but a great example of this is purchasing businesses on something like MicroAcquire, which I've been a fan of. I don't have any equity in them or anything. It's just a really cool website that I go on quite a bit to look for businesses that I could purchase. And so there's all kinds of different businesses on this site, but you can see software companies, you can see a variety of different like Shopify app companies and e-commerce companies and everything in the mix. You can potentially buy one of these companies and start to ramp it up, maybe focus on increasing revenue quite a bit and then actually flipping it and selling it for even more, but also cash flowing in the process. It's something that I really want to do. I just don't have the time for it. So this is for those people who maybe don't have $100,000 to go buy a plot of land, but maybe you have $5,000 that you could purchase a business and run it. And I think MicroAcquire is a cool idea. There's other ones like Flippa as well. There's some other websites where you can buy companies, but for the most part, I would say just be really careful with them because some of them are just low quality businesses as a whole. So do your due diligence on all of those if you consider buying a business. And of course, if you get anything out of this video and you're thinking about buying a business, make sure that you do this one thing, okay? Don't buy yourself a job, all right? You want to be the shareholder, sort of like the board member of a company, not the CEO of a company. When I think about how I can generate cash, and I might say, okay, well, you know what, car washes could be a great example. Well, I don't want to have to buy the car wash and then run the car wash and be scrubbing cars. So make sure that you're not buying yourself a job, simply buying a business and then putting an operator in place. It was a big aha moment that I had a couple years ago, and it really helped me out a lot. So if you consider buying business, just remember that. Don't buy yourself a job. Make sure that you're putting operators in place to fully run the business. And if that's not possible, if the numbers don't make sense, then it's probably not worth it to buy that business. All right, so let's say that maybe you don't want to buy massive plots of timber by yourself and like figure out all those things and understand forestry. If you don't want to do that, you can consider investing into farmland, which with a much smaller amount through something like AcreTrader. So AcreTrader allows you to invest into plots of land, but it breaks them up. Think like Fundrise, but for farmland. And so they'll explain like all the cap rates and how much you can make on them and the projected incomes and all that on their website. I will leave a link to AcreTrader down below. It's an affiliate, so I might make a couple of dollars when you sign up for AcreTrader if you go check that out down below in the description. But it's something that I've really heavily considered investing into for some different farms because, hey, look, they're not making any more land. We need, crops, we need food, we need all those things. And so owning farms can be a really viable option for people if it's done correctly. So that's one that I think is really cool. And I'll let you know if I do end up investing through something like AcreTrader. I might just go out and buy the farms myself because I can afford it. But if you want to break it up, and I think like most of their investments are like $10,000 or $15,000 investments, so they're pretty small compared to like the larger actually buying the entire farm. You're just buying a segment or a little fraction of that farm. All right, so there's two more here. One of them is music royalties. So there's a couple of sites where you can do this as well, but you can buy royalties for not only music actually, but for movies, for books, for IP, intellectual property. So basically for anything. If you think about like, say for example, the Beatles, right, which is like one of the biggest bands of all time, they've generated billions and billions of dollars even after they broke up and some of them passed away. That brand, the Beatles, and their songs are generating billions of dollars. And I've seen a lot of artists, I have a lot of friends in the music industry, and you'd be surprised how many people don't actually own the IP or don't actually own the music that they've made maybe 20 years ago. And so this is just one example here. Like, for example, Eminem, like one of his big songs, right? He might not even own that. It's probably owned by somebody else. It's probably owned by a record label or even investors who bought that. So then every time someone streams it on Spotify, that person ends up making the money instead of something like Eminem, right? So that's just one example. I don't know if that's actually the case for him specifically, but you can buy music royalties. It's all kinds of royalties, and it really is the true definition of passive income. So the last one that I think is really fascinating, and this once again kind of plays on the land aspect and how much passive income can really be generated from land, but it's actually to create some type of parking lot on a property, okay? And I've mentioned this once before, but it didn't really get many views in a video. So, when I drive my truck around, I have to store it sometimes in different cities. Like, right now my truck is out in Colorado, and I just have it parked somewhere, right? And I'm paying somebody like daily to park my car there. And when I was in college at Penn State, I paid $25 a month to park my car in some guy's driveway, and he probably had a dozen cars there. So when you do the math on that, this guy was making about $3,600 a year in passive income for just letting some people park cars in his driveway. So it was a pretty good gig for him. He did literally nothing except for just say hi to me when I first dropped off my car, and then I just Venmo'd him every month. So this guy was making some good passive income from doing that. And imagine if you could scale this up. Now, I think as you scale it up, you need to start worrying about permits and other things. But if you just have a couple people parking their cars in your driveway, it's not really much of a big deal. Although I did have to sign like a waiver in case a tree fell on my car or something, he wasn't liable for it. But it's not really a big deal if you just have like a handful of people parking their vehicles in their driveway. So that's one of my favorite ones that I would love to see someone implement. And you could go even larger scale with this. I mean, if you had like a big commercial property, a multi-acre commercial property, and you just turn it into a massive parking lot with thousands of spaces, and you happen to be near a large airport, for example, whew, man, you can make a lot of money from that. It's just a dream of mine, really. That's totally passive income there. So those are some interesting cash flowing ideas. I hope you found this video to be somewhat useful. I don't think I've heard most of these. Nobody talks about timberland and farmland and parking lots. I don't know why, but they don't really talk about them. I guess they're not very flashy, but they're ones that I'm most excited to invest into this year. So I'll leave those links down below for any of the resources, like if you want to get started with dividend stocks on Moomoo and get your 15 free stocks, you can do that down below. If you want to get started with AcreTrader and any other potential companies, I'll leave all those links down below for you. So thanks for watching the video, and I'll see everybody sometime in the next month.